Hi, this is Steve Paikin, and you're listening to one of the absolute best. Here's Toronto Mike.
What up, Mike? Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto, where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto, where you wanna get the city love. Okay. I'm in Toronto, Mike, we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1703 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Yes, we are open. An award-winning podcast from Monaris, hosted by FOTML Grego. Toronto Maple Leafs baseball. Christy Pitts has the best baseball in the city outside the dome. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. Building Toronto Skyline, a podcast and book from Nick Iones, sponsored by Fusion Corp Construction Management, Inc., and Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Joining me today, returning to Toronto Mike for his, and this is a question mark at the end, his exit interview, it's Steve Paikin.
With the Wendell Clark Bob Neely edition of Toronto Mike.
Very good, 1703.
Exactly.
Before I press record, I was telling you who was in your seat before you. Sometimes it's fun to say who was sitting there before you. And before you, it was Donna Ramsey Anderson, who is like a country music legend in this country. And her and her husband, Leroy Anderson, were the official duo of the Tommy Hunter show. So I just dropped this fun fact on you. We talked Tommy Hunter. And what fun fact did you have for me?
My recollection is that my father's uncle, so his mother's brother, whose name was Saul Holliff, was the manager for Johnny Cash, Debbie Laurie Kay, and Tommy Hunter.
Wow.
That is my recollection for back in the day.
Well, you have a good recollection. Like you have a steel trap of a memory.
Most of the time.
I'm sure you got that right. And I mentioned to you in passing that next week, because exit interview, I have in quotes for you, and we'll dive into that in a moment. But I have Tom Harrington's actual exit interview next week. And not only is he a longtime CBCer who's no longer there, but he did sing on the Tommy Hunter show.
Tom Harrington and I have been pals for a long time, and he is one of 3 Harrington siblings that I have worked with during my so-called career. Not only Tom, but also Beth Harrington, who did entertainment reporting at CBLT when I was there more than 30 years ago, and Denise Harrington, who was Queen's Park reporter for CBLT when I was there. And so he's, there's one of I've worked with 3 Harrington kids, and I'm sure there are more, and maybe I will look forward to working with one of them someday.
Do you find it's an awfully small world, this Canadian media landscape?
You know what, Mike? There's a great Red Sox fan by the name of Stephen Wright, who was a funny guy, right? Comedian.
Not only, just if I may, as a Reservoir Dogs fanatic, the first movie directed by Quentin Tarantino, he's the voice of KBBL's Super Sounds of the 70s.
Okay, so he's got a very droll sense of humor, and he used to say, "It's a small world, but I wouldn't want to paint it."
Yeah, he had those one-liners. Stephen Wright, still with us, of course.
Yeah,
but,
and still a Bo Sox fan.
Well, we can't all be perfect, right? Okay, so you're a Bo Sox. You're still a Bo Sox fan.
I am, even though they're having a really mediocre year. Yeah.
You know, as I fell in love with my Toronto Blue Jays in '83, and I followed them closely in 1983, and then forevermore. But this is actually the first season, and I don't know if maybe who knows what's going on that I'm doing this, but I decided to take a year off. Like, I actually decided consciously to tap out of my Toronto Blue Jay season because I was kind of disgruntled by management and Shapiro and Atkins and some decisions, and I haven't followed any Toronto Blue Jay baseball in 2025.
Really? So you've missed the fact that they swept the Athletics.
Like, I catch it here and there. I'm on Blue Sky, and I catch a little bit here and there, so I got an idea. In fact, I even booked for Friday afternoon, I have Keegan Matheson coming over, who covers the Blue Jays for MLB.com. And I even had to tell him, I'm like, I do want to talk to you. I just don't want to talk 2025 Blue Jays. So we're going to talk about like the legacy, because he just wrote a book. But that's where I'm at right now with my
Here's the bigger question for you, Mike. Are you going to take next year off for the Maple Leafs?
I said, no, I won't. I will not. I am curious. I know you're a Leafs fan as well. I know Ron Ellis was your favorite player. I'm curious what changes are in store, what's going to happen with Mitch Marner, John Tavares. I'm still on board the Leafs train, for better or worse, and it's primarily been in my lifetime for worse.
Well, yes and no. It's been for better during the regular season, where they have a lot of success, and it's for worse during the playoffs, where they don't seem to have much. Although, you know what? In fairness to the Leafs, and now that we're at the Stanley Cup final round, I think we can legitimately say the Leafs were the third best team in the NHL this year. There's no question the two best teams are playing for the Stanley Cup. But I'll tell you what, who's played the Panthers better than the Maple Leafs this year in the playoffs? Admittedly, 2 games were stinkers. But the Leafs took the Panthers to 7 games, way better than Carolina, okay? And way better than Tampa. So, you know.
Do they give you a trophy for that, Steve?
No, they don't. They don't. But to say that it's been only misery this year, I think, is incorrect. There've been a lot of great moments this past year. It just unfortunately ended prematurely.
We're a great regular season team, and there's a lot. If you're excited to see, I don't know, a couple years back, will Austin Matthews hit 70 goals, for example? That's thrilling. Will Mitch Marner get 100 points? That's exciting. The problem is, you're all about the playoffs, and we've won precisely, and you know this, but since the lockout in 2005,
2 rounds.
We've won 2 rounds.
Yeah.
And Buffalo Sabres, since that same lockout, have won more rounds than we have.
And they haven't made the playoffs in how many years?
Like 17 or something? I don't know.
I know. Yeah, no, there are those kind of anomalous little trivial facts that you can bring up, but I don't know. I'm after the Leafs lost Game 7 as badly as they did, I admit I sort of got on my Maple Leaf, what do you call it, the thread that I have with a bunch of my buddies about.
You have
this.
like a chat? What is this?
Yeah,
WhatsApp?
Yeah.
Where is this?
Exactly.
Chat?
No, it's just on text.
Just on text.
And I literally said in that moment of heartbreak, okay, that's it, guys. I'm out. I cannot do this anymore.
Right.
But a couple of weeks have passed, and I'm like you, intrigued to see what they're going to do with the roster. So I'm sure I'll be back. And I watch. There's 82 games in an NHL season, right?
Yeah, there are 82.
So I probably watch 70.
Wow.
I have the TV on while I'm working, and I watch the game, and I watch a lot of games, and I text with my buddies during the games, and what can I tell you? I'm obsessed and have the affliction of being a Leaf fan since 1962.
See, I feel I'm the official biographer of Steve Paikin, so I can tell you, I know your hockey team is the Leafs. I know your baseball team is the Boston Red Sox. And we've covered this in a previous episode, because when you were growing up, there were no Toronto Blue Jays.
Correct.
And I get that. I completely understand that. But I also know you have a CFL team near and dear to your heart. You're wearing a T-shirt now. I know we talked about your mom's love of this team, but you are a Hamilton Tiger Cat fan.
Well, I'm born and raised in Hamilton, Mike, so of course I'm a Tiger Cat fan. And to the extent that my kids care about football, they like the Ticats as well, except for the oldest, who has, because he was born and raised in Toronto, doesn't care about his father's views, and loves the Argos, and lives overseas and still follows the Argos very carefully. And, he's out of the will, but that's okay.
Love it so much. Okay, so we mentioned some baseball, so I'm actually going to just take this opportunity now to keep it on the topic of baseball before we dive into the big questions I have for you. And so hold all that. But I do have a book for you. It's The History of Toronto Maple Leafs Baseball. Of course, they play at Christie Pitts, because last season you made the trek to Christie Pitts to appear on one of my live recordings, live from a Maple Leafs game.
That's a beautiful book. That's great. Thank you for that. I was all set to go this year on opening day, which was Mother's Day. Yeah. And when I told my wife I am going to spend Mother's Day down at Christie Pitts, she said, "Oh, no, you're not."
You know what? I had a difficult conversation too, because but I was holding an event. TMLX 18 was at Christie Pitts during that opener, and I had this okay, babe, I love you, but here's what we're going to do. And then we'll do a dinner thing or whatever. And luckily I was able to get to Christie Pitts to host my own event. But I got to tell you about yesterday real quick here. Mm-hmm. So yesterday I had the honor of throwing out the ceremonial first pitch.
Nice.
I'm going to guess Steve Paikin, from CBC and then TVO and to be discussed where you're at now in mere moments. But I'm guessing you've thrown out a ceremonial first pitch or two in your career.
Never.
Is that right?
Not at any level. So now my first question for you is, did you throw a strike?
So I absolutely did throw a strike.
Okay,
and
good.
I had my 9-year-old as my videographer capturing the video. Let's take a minute. Now this didn't, it's a podcast. You can go to my YouTube channel. Toronto Mike has a YouTube channel where I have the full video here. And I also posted it on my Instagram page. And I put it on Blue Sky. So you can find this. If you're looking for it, you can find
I'm gonna
this
go look
pitch.
for it.
But here's the audio. We'll see how this works in podcast form. So let's listen to this. My daughter taking some video live from Christie Pitts yesterday just before 2 p.m. This is 1 minute.
All right, okay. Mike, you ready? He's gonna walk through. Hey, come on.
We have to be quick. Play number 18.
That's CNN correspondent. You ready? Like we practiced.
Yeah, that's right down the middle.
He says it's down the middle. It's a strike.
Right?
Do you want this? Oh, yeah. I don't know if you want me to sign it.
Sign it.
Got it.
Amazing.
There you go.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
We need to get a marker so we can get everybody to sign it.
You know what that means? That means rehearsing and practicing makes you perfect. That's a strike. So Steve Paikin, I threw a strike.
Well done. Good for you. You remember that scene? It was just after 9/11 at Yankee Stadium when President George W. Bush was going to throw out the first pitch. And, this is literally within days of the Twin Towers having been taken down. And Derek Jeter goes up to President Bush just before he's about to throw out the first pitch. And he says, "You better not bounce it in there or they'll boo you."
You know what? I do remember this. They'll boo ya. And I was in my mind when I was going to throw the first pitch, I was thinking of 50 Cent. I know you're a big 50 Cent fan, aren't you, Steve?
He threw it like about 8 feet, just a little bit outside, as they say
Right.
in Major League. Yeah.
Oh, the late great Bob Uecker.
Yeah.
No longer with us.
Yeah.
It's too bad. Now, I threw that strike, but I think I threw that strike because earlier in the day I took my 2 youngest kids to a local baseball diamond where I basically decided where would the mound be. I had my 9-year-old as like the catcher, and I threw a practice pitch, but I visualized I was at Christie Pitts. And this thing I did, which is essentially a rehearsal, is because I just finished season 2 of a show on HBO called The Rehearsal. Are you aware of this show, Steve Paikin?
No.
Okay. So there's a guy named Nate Fielder, Canadian, Nathan Fielder, who he did, season 1 was amazing, but season 2 of The Rehearsal, he was looking into aviation safety. And I'm not going to spoil this for anybody, but it's just an absolute mind-blowing. All throughout this season, you're like, I can't believe I'm watching this. I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe this Nate Fielder is doing this and that I'm able to consume this content. So I'm just here to passionately endorse season 2 of The Rehearsal with Nate Fielder. But because of this, I was inspired to visualize and rehearse that I was at Christie Pitts throwing out that first pitch, which I did yesterday morning. I also, by the way, had my 9-year-old record that. That's on my YouTube channel as well. So you can see my rehearsal pitch, and then you can see me at Christie Pitts. And I believe I threw that strike because of the rehearsal.
Okay, I'm ready. I keep a list of shows to watch that people recommend. So I'm going to write this down on my
And if you like it,
right
I want
now.
full credit. Okay.
The Rehearsal, and it's on what channel?
It's you get Crave?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, you'll find it on Crave. It's an
Okay.
HBO show.
Great. What's it about?
Wow, it's tough to describe, except that this comedic genius guy named Nathan Fielder basically is he's big on rehearsing. I don't even think I can.
Is he related to Cecil or Prince?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Prince Fielder hitting bombs at the Dome is like a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Seth Jones. So just we're bouncing around a little bit here, and then we're going to get to what people are tuned in for. But I'm seeing Seth Jones in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and I'm blowing my 11-year-old's mind and telling him about, do you know Seth Jones, as a child is in Toronto, his father is Popeye Jones of the Toronto Raptors.
I did. Well, I heard that in one of the broadcasts, so I know that now. Yes.
Okay, I can't tell Steve Paikin anything. Although I did tell you about The Rehearsal.
You did. Yeah.
You're going to tune into season 2 and check that out.
Should I not watch season 1?
Watch 1 too. 1 is excellent.
Okay.
and you can probably do 2 without one. It's not, but I recommend both seasons.
Okay.
That's an order, Mr. Paikin.
Yes, sir.
Walk of Life. By the way, if you're gonna share something on social media, which social media app do you share that thought on?
I go in order of X, Blue Sky, Facebook, Threads. That order.
Okay. So
I guess a LinkedIn in there somewhere as well.
Okay, there's a lot going on there. So first stop for you is the app formerly known as Twitter.
Correct. Still. And that's habit forming as much as anything. I don't really enjoy much of what I read, see, and hear there. But
you're still there.
I'm still there. I'm a lot less there than I used to be, but it's still a good place for me to, get my wares out, promote my stuff, the shows I'm on, the columns I write, that kind of stuff. Yes.
I got a note from you, like, are we still on for today? And I realized I don't think Steve Paikin is checking in on Blue Sky, because I had many promotional messages on posts tagging you on Blue Sky that this episode was happening. So I got the sense maybe you had left Blue Sky.
No, I'm on it, but I am more of a inputter as opposed to outputter. Is that right?
But do you check your mentions?
I'm
Not so much.
Not so much.
You got that tip from Ian Hannamansing, right? He took a beating on Blue Sky. You might have been aware of this.
You're really getting in his kitchen on this show, aren't you?
Well, that wasn't recorded. That's the first time I've mentioned his name since I pressed record.
But you mentioned him before you pushed record.
With kindness, because I can't wait for him to make his Toronto Mike debut, and I'm a big fan. Okay, well, Walk of Life on Blue Sky.
The pressure's on you, Mike, because Ian had me on his show a couple of weeks ago.
I saw.
And did a brilliant interview. I thought he was.
Well, I'm going to beat him, okay?
Well, we'll see. The jury's out. Let's see. He's pretty good. So let's see what you can do.
It's quantity over quality, right?
In podcasting, maybe. Okay.
Okay, that's why I'm on episode 1703. You can't touch me here. But Walk of Life said, just one word for Mr. Paikin. 2 if it's not hyphenated. This will start a great debate whether you should hyphenate it or not, because I never do. But he just wants me to say to you, thank you. Okay, so people have been reaching out, wanting to express thank you to you, because you've been the face and the voice of the agenda. Has it 19 years?
Yeah.
So I need to hear straight from you. I know you've been on the National, and I've been, reading the TVO news and everything like that. But please tell me, is it true that the agenda is coming to an end at the end of this very month?
Yes. Did you want more? I mean, you said be succinct.
I need lots more.
Yeah.
Why is the agenda shuttered at the end of the month on my birthday?
When's your birthday?
June 27.
That's the day of our last show.
I know.
That's right. Yeah.
I know.
Well, it's nothing to do with that. Sorry to say it had nothing to do with your birthday. No, this is pretty simple, Mike. The reality is the contract that I am about to finish, I signed 3 years ago. And at the beginning of that contract, as I was signing it, I sort of said to my boss, John Ferry, who's the vice president of whatever it is. They change the name every now and then.
Right.
Programming, essentially.
Sure.
I said, I think this is it, eh? I think this will be the last one. And he said, well, if you want to keep going, that's okay. And I said, nah, I don't know. I think this will be the last one. It just feels right. I mean, it's 19 years that I've been hosting the agenda.
Yeah.
I well remember Barbara Frum, when I used to work at CBC, the legendary Barbara Frum, saying to me, Steve, one day the viewers wake up and they just get sick of looking at your face. and that's always been in the back of my head, which essentially is advice not to overstay your welcome. And so I've always thought, better to leave the party an hour early than a minute too late. There are a bunch of things I still would like to try to accomplish in my so-called career. You just don't have time to do any of those things when you're hosting a daily show, because when you're hosting a daily show, it's a 7-day-a-week thing. And I know people don't believe that, but it's true.
I believe that.
Well, I'm telling you, you're always, I'm not saying it's all day every day, but you are working every day. You are reading books. You are writing questions. You are booking guests. You are writing intros. It's endless. You're reading research. It's endless. And if I wanted to have a chance to do some of these other things, then let's end while I think we're on still a bit of a up note. Like, I think the show is still pretty decent. So.
I think the show is as good as it's ever been. And I think you're a bit like the magnificent one, Mario Lemieux, who did retire too soon. Like, he retired. and he was still in his prime, and he was still doing great. And I guess he felt it was time to step away.
But I'm not retiring. The difference is Mario stepped down from playing hockey and then did not play any more hockey. I am not quitting journalism. I'm just going to look for different avenues to do what I want to do. And instead of doing a thing, which the agenda is, hosting a show, I'm going to do 15 things. And I'm just going to kind of, I'm going to spend some time exploring what those 15 things are.
Well, obviously, I have follow-up questions. So this contract that was coming to an end, I guess, at the end of June of 2025, I suppose.
Yeah.
Right? You, Steve Paikin, made the decision not to sign a new contract? Like, so you could have continued with the agenda if you had chosen to continue?
That's what they said. They said, we can keep going if you want. And I said, no,
well, that's significant because some people are going to think they didn't offer you, like Shanahan, right? Brendan Shanahan is moved on because MLSE did not offer another contract.
Well, here's the thing. They did offer another contract, and I have signed another contract, but it's not to do the agenda. Going forward, I'm going to do the weekly On Poly podcast with John Michael McGrath.
It's FOTM, John Michael McGrath.
FOTM, indeed. Yes, we've been here together, he and I. That will air Friday nights on TVO, so I will still be hosting that weekly show. I will still be writing a weekly column for the TVO website, tvo.org. I will still be hosting something called TVO Today Live, which is a show we do, 8, 9, 10 times a year, where we go out into the community in front of a live audience and we bring big guests in. We brought Tom Friedman in from the New York Times last week, taped a show with him. That will air June the 9th at 9 p.m. So I'm going to continue to do TVO Today Live, and I'm going to continue to do this little 5-minute YouTube show I do on Ontario political history called Ontario Chronicle. So I'm still going to be doing 4 things for TVO, just not the agenda.
So, because the agenda was the bulk of your time and effort at TVO, is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So the agenda. So I mean, again, you're on the Sunshine List. Do you know that?
I'm aware. In fact,
I didn't have to hack into.
I was the first journalist ever to be on the Sunshine List back in 1996.
So again, I'm just stating some obvious public facts here, but in 2024. You made $369,941. So that's almost like a hair under 370,000 Canadian dollars pre-tax, of course, your 2024 salary. So this new contract, is it fair to say that it's for significantly less because you're not going to be working on the agenda anymore?
I think I'm just about to take a 75% pay cut.
Okay, will you still make the Sunshine List? That's what I want to know.
Oh, I don't know.
Will it be close?
Hadn't thought about that. I don't know.
So you mentioned,
and you know what, Mike? I don't mind working for that much money, even though I could have made twice or 3 times as much in the private sector. But I love the mission of TVO. I love the people I work with. I like the fact it's non-commercial. I like the fact that the programs we did there were stuff that I was, that I felt I had a good hand in being a part of. So my 32 years at TVO have been joyous. I would just put it that way. Joyous, and I'm glad it's not over.
Okay, a few more questions. Don't worry, we will have some time to celebrate your run. Not that, again, I put the question mark on exit interview because, of course, I know it was in the press release, for goodness sakes. You were still going to do the podcast, On Poly podcast with John Michael McGrath,
yes.
And you were still, I call it blogging, but you're basically you're still writing articles
writing
for
columns,
TVO.org. And then I didn't even realize this TVO Today and then this 5-minute history. This is all stuff. So you're still going to have some visibility on TVO, but why not continue the agenda with a new host? Like, why does the agenda have to go when you go?
Well, obviously that wasn't my decision, but I agree with the decision that they've made, which is to say, I think because I've been the one and only host of the agenda, it may be too much associated with me, and for another host to come in and have to take that over as opposed to start their own new branded thing, I think it's probably easier for the new host to go that way.
Well, I think you're 100% right, because no matter who it is, they're going to be compared to Steve Paikin. And because people are so, for almost 2 decades, they know the agenda with Steve Paikin. And I think that that's sort of what they know, what people are comfortable with. And there's no human on the planet that can be Steve Paikin. Thank goodness.
Well, yeah, I mean, one's enough, right? One's enough. Now, look,
goodness.
I mean, not to push this comparison too far, Mike, but the reality is when Johnny Carson stepped down from The Tonight Show after 30 years, and then Jay Leno came in to replace him, the first many months of Jay Leno replacing Johnny Carson were very difficult. Very difficult because Jay wanted to do his own new show, and yet there was sort of an expectation by the viewers and maybe even some people on his staff that he not change so much of what they liked about the previous show.
Right.
And that's a hard thing. It's without a shoehorn, that is a very hard foot to get into that shoe. And so, I think it makes just as much sense. No, I think it makes more sense to wind up the agenda after what I think's been a pretty successful 19-year run.
Absolutely.
And give the next host a brand new opportunity with a new show called The Rundown, which is coming to a theater near you soon.
Who's hosting the Rundown?
I don't believe anybody's been signed yet.
Whoa, what if I told you it was me? I'd be lying, but what if I told you that?
I'd be thrilled with that. I think that'd be a great choice.
Thank you. You're very kind. Okay. I'm still waiting for that phone to ring. Maybe I should turn on the ringer. Maybe it has been ringing. All right. So one of the elusive guests on the agenda is our now won 3 majorities in a row, Doug Ford.
Yes.
Premier of this province.
Yes.
And I believe you've told me on a previous visit to the basement here that he's the first premier not to be interviewed on TVO.
During my time at TVO, that's right.
But
I've been at TVO.
Since TVO was created, right?
Oh,
it wouldn't be the agenda, but every premier has been interviewed on TVO since the TVO was created.
Correct.
Until Doug Ford. I don't know who your guests are because you got a month of shows left to go. The final episode of the agenda is going to air on June 27. Will Doug Ford be one of these guests?
I mean, you have to ask him, but I mean, to the best of my knowledge right now, given that his staff don't return my emails, and I would say that it's not going to happen. But, it's a funny thing because Premier Ford and I have a perfectly good, I would say even a warm, professional relationship. We really do. When we see each other, when we're in each other's company, it's always very warm and very professional. He's been on the program a few times in the past as a leadership candidate for the Progressive Conservative Party, as a candidate for mayor of Toronto, and one time when he authored a book. I'm trying to remember what the name of the book was, and I can't.
Ford
remember.
Nation. Isn't everything called Ford Nation?
Okay, maybe. Anyway, so he's been into our studio 3 times for interviews. Okay. But for whatever reason, I have been unable to convince his staff to have him come in for an interview on the agenda since he has been Premier of Ontario over the last 7 years.
An interesting tidbit was revealed on Toronto Mike in May, which is only last month. My guest was Supriya Dwivedi. Do you know this name, Supriya Dwivedi?
You're mispronouncing it.
Say it to me.
You don't pronounce the W. Supriya Dwivedi.
Oh my goodness! She never corrected me once.
Because she's nice. She's nice and would not correct you. I'm not as nice, so I did correct you.
Okay, my apologies. So Supriya talked about her time at 640. She was on the air at 640 doing the morning show with Matt Gurney and then with Mike Stafford. They're both FOTMs, as Supriya is now. And she talked about the hotline. There was a Doug Ford hotline. And Doug Ford got straight on the air when he'd call. And this apparently existed at 640 and 1010. They had these Doug Ford hotlines where he would call in. There is no TVO hotline for Doug Ford, and if there is, he's never called it.
I guess that's right, and I think Donald Trump probably had the same kind of relationship with Morning Joe before he became president the first time. Whenever he called in, they'd always just put him on the air. Yeah, no such luck. We don't have that hotline.
Interesting. I see you in a T-shirt, and you're in a T-shirt. Of course, I mentioned the Hamilton Ticats. Oski wee wee, that's what we say, right?
Indeed. Well, when you say we, you're an Argo fan, so I don't think you say it, but I say it.
I have a Doug Flutie bobblehead right over here, so absolutely.
I must confess, I did like Doug Flutie an awful lot. To me, he was the quintessential CFL player, and I know when he first came to Toronto to play for the Argonauts, we lined him up for an interview, and I remember thinking, you know what, let's not get him into a studio and do that. Let's go out in a field, we'll toss a ball around for a while, we'll do an interview at a on a football field.
Right.
And we did that. And it's really one of the great memories of my time at TVO, because he was a perfectly wonderful guy, and he and I both went to university in Boston, so we had that little connection. And was a
Hail Mary pass,
lovely,
Boston College.
Absolutely. Do you remember who caught it?
No.
Phelan was his last name. Phelan. It was either Jerry Phelan, I think was his name.
Okay.
You could look it up right now and see if I'm right.
I will definitely be looking that up.
Gerard Phelan?
Moment.
Gerald Phelan? Something like that.
I will look it up once I set you up for this
What game?
question.
That was the Orange Bowl game, right?
I've heard the radio call of that so many times. It's tremendous.
It's a great moment in football. Great moment. And Doug Flutie made that moment happen for Boston College. I went to Boston University, so we're rivals in that regard. But
well,
yeah, you're looking
I'm now looking
eh?
it up as we speak. And yes, you are once again correct. It's Gerard Phelan.
Gerard, okay.
Okay, it was 1984.
Yeah.
And it was University of Miami and Boston College. And Boston College was down 45-41 with mere seconds left. And at his own 48-yard line, Flutie launched his Hail Mary pass.
Amazing play. And I'm trying to remember who the quarterback for Miami was. I think it might have been Bernie Kosar.
Oh, it would have been. I
think
think you'd be right here.
I think so.
Okay, you got me Googling here, Steve Paikin. Is there any Googling during the agenda recordings? You have producers for that, don't you?
No, I actually did it today.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did. While I was interviewing, you know Fareed Zakaria from CNN?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So while
Because I'm also from CNN. We know each other.
Oh, yes,
from
of
Christmas
course.
parties and stuff.
Of course, yes, you're their Canadian correspondent. While I was interviewing Fareed Zakaria about this new book he's got out, which is quite fascinating, I just, for whatever reason, I Googled his Wikipedia page just because I thought maybe there'll be something there I can use. And sure enough, his birthday is January 20th. Do you know what happened on his birthday this year?
The inauguration of Donald Trump.
Correct. So I threw a little question his way about that, and he told a cute little story about it, which I would not have known to ask had I not done a quick little Google search.
You never
on
know
him. Yeah.
what you'll discover doing this. And I can also tell you my oldest son's birthday is January 20th.
Uh-huh.
So lots going on that very important day. I'm very quickly, Bernie Kosar was in fact the quarterback, and he passed, you ready for this? In this game, the Hail Flutie game they call it, he passed for a school record. That's the Miami Hurricanes, for goodness sakes. He passed for 447 yards.
And lost.
Oh,
my gosh. Imagine that.
And Phelan himself caught 11 passes for 226 yards and 2 touchdowns. And by the way, Flutie in this game passed for 472 yards and 3 touchdowns. He became the first major college quarterback to surpass 10,000 yards passing in a career. What a game.
I watched the game. It was phenomenal. I was actually, 1984?
Yep.
Right, because I remember this.
November 23rd.
I was working for CHFI. It was on the weekend, obviously, so I was working for CHFI at the time, and I think I was anchoring the news that day. So I had the game on in the newsroom while I was preparing the newscast.
Unbelievable. You know, see, we never know what's going to happen. I just mentioned my bobblehead of Doug Flutie, and look where it brought us here. That's what I love about it. So I have some questions. So you record the day you you air an episode of the agenda. Is that correct?
Mostly. We tape on the day for that night. We can also tape on the day for the next night, or we can tape on that day for a week or two from now. But mostly it's the same day.
So for the remaining episodes of the agenda, do you have it basically etched in stone? Who will be the guests?
I don't know about who will be the guest, but we know the subject matter of the shows. And I mean, remember, you and I are sitting here on Monday, June 2nd, taping this.
Right.
I shouldn't say taping because there's no tape anymore. We're recording this.
I'll say to people, it's live to tape. And then I realize, that's an antiquated expression.
So we're recording this, which meant that we have...
I'm supposed to be recording this? Okay.
Which means we have 20 episodes left. 4 of those episodes will be on Poly Podcast on Friday. So we really only have 16 episodes left of the agenda, technically.
Yeah.
And we did one today. So 15, down to our last 15 shows. Is that right? 4 times. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, that's not very many episodes. Are there any elusive guests to come maybe that you've wanted for 19 years, but you finally got because it's the end of the line? Is there a Bette Midler or something? What is Bette Midler?
Nice Carson reference there.
Right, thank you. I was thinking Krusty the Clown. Krusty gets canceled, but both are true. Okay, so I'm wondering what can we expect for that final episode on Friday, June 27th, when you shout out Toronto Mike's 51st birthday? What can we expect that? And also, are there any special guests that people will be like, oh, he got that person?
Well, the short answer on that is I don't know, because I don't think, we're not booking guests into the 3rd and 4th week of June yet. So
I thought maybe you would book that far out.
I don't think so.
With an ability to pivot should something break.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. I think we have a sense of what the shows are going to be about, but I don't think we know yet who the guests are going to be. Look at that the final show on Friday, the 27th of June. The first half of it will be the On Poly podcast with JMM and me. And then the back end of the program, the last 15, 20 minutes, will, you know what? I don't know yet. I don't know.
To be discovered.
Yeah.
This is, of course, June 27, the day after TMLX 19, which is taking place at Great Lakes Brewery. I know already, because we talked beforehand, that you are unable to attend this Toronto Mike listener experience.
My daughter's graduating from university that day. That's right. So
I get it. I
going to
got that on
convocation.
June 20th.
But you know what? I think of a different anniversary. When you tell me June 26th,
Yeah.
2025, I think to myself, 30 years ago that day, Mike Harris was sworn in as the Common Sense Revolutionary Premier of Ontario, 22nd Premier of Ontario.
You know, you should co-host this podcast. You can have on Polly, and you could be Toronto Mike's co-host.
Well,
if you have time in your hands.
Number one, you don't need a co-host. You're very good at flying solo. And number two, trust me, I will drop that little nugget on Polly that week.
Okay, love it. Okay, so I brought up. I realized.
Mike, hang on. While we're at
then
it,
I have to remind me to get back to your T-shirt. Go. Yeah.
Okay, but while we're at it,
NTMLS,
I would also say June 26th
Yeah.
will be the 40th anniversary of the David Peterson government being sworn in at Queen's Park in 1985.
Everybody knows that, Steve.
Well, here's why that one's bigger, actually, bigger than the Harris anniversary, and that is because David Peterson, when he was sworn in on that date, was the first Liberal Premier of Ontario in 42 years. It had been 42 straight years of progressive Conservative governments, all the way from George Drew to Frank Miller, and Mr. Peterson was the first non-Tory Premier in 42 years, and that's the 40th anniversary of which is also on the 26th.
Love it. Fun facts, mind blows. Love it. So I mentioned you're wearing a T-shirt because I'm just going to point out, and you're here to put on the definitive record, that when Steve Paikin, I'll talk about you like you're not here, when Steve Paikin is recording a podcast, he rocks a T-shirt. But when Steve Paikin is on the agenda, he's all dressed up.
Yeah, right. And I love the fact, this happened almost accidentally.
Yeah.
For the podcast, I mean, I've always worn a suit and tie on the air. And when we started the On Poly podcast on television as well, like we'd done it audio only for 4 years, and this year we put it on television as well, or last year, whatever. They said, you know, you don't have to wear a suit and tie on a podcast. And I said, well, what should I wear then? And they said, well, kind of wear whatever you want. And because it's far more casual and it's a different vibe and the whole thing.
Completely different vibe.
And so I just started, the first thing I started to do was wear stuff that kind of was Ontario themed. I wore a T-shirt with a map of the province of Ontario on it. I wore a T-shirt with a highway sign on it. I wore a T-shirt with some Manitoulin Island stuff on it because I got a camp there. And then as the thing evolved, I started to think, you know what? And I did what you and I just did right now. Oh, there's this anniversary coming up of such and such a premier doing this. Maybe I'll put a picture of, I'll wear a T-shirt with that premier's face on it. And it's just evolved to the point where, yeah, that's what we do now.
You should be writing articles at tvo.org about the shirt you wore on Polly that week.
Which one?
Like just everyone.
Oh, any of them.
Yeah.
You're saying that as a column idea.
Because there's a column story to every T-shirt you decide to don for that recording. Let's hear from you the story behind the T-shirt.
That's a good point. Well, last week we did it. We for the first time ever, I think, we did the On Poly podcast at Victoria University at U of T in the Isabel Bader Theatre in front of a live audience. And it happened to be on the 162nd, I think, anniversary of John Sandfield Macdonald becoming not the first Premier of Ontario, which he also was, but this was becoming the Premier of United Canada. So this is before Confederation.
Right.
And he was the premier of that. So I had a T-shirt with John S., not John A.
Let's not confuse these two people. Two different humans.
Sandfield Macdonald, who's got a statue up at Queen's Park, as does John A. Macdonald now. They're going to uncrate that.
They're going to unbox. Yep. There's going to be an unboxing for John A. Macdonald. He's back, baby. Okay.
Yep.
Wow. All right. So I have a question about your guests on the agenda and how we're now winding down. And, you know, I only entered your life in the last... 7 years or something like that. So you did 19 years of the agenda. The last 7 years, I've been in your orbit. Okay, we have become friends.
I know where this is going, and I've never had you on.
You couldn't figure out some angle somewhere because CNN has me on, but TVO, the phone never rings. I'm still waiting for that call.
Here's the thing, and people are now going to find out one of the biggest differences between public television and private television. Mm-hmm. In private television, the anchor really is kind of the king or the queen. The anchor says in private television, I want this person on the show that I host, then that's what happens. It doesn't work that way in public television. In public television, I and the producers pitch story ideas and guest ideas to the executive producer, and she decides who gets on. She decides which subjects we will do and which guests will get on. Not me.
You can't throw a wink or something.
So-
like, wink, wink.
Mike, I'm sure that over the course of the time I've known you, I pitched having you on the program, and for whatever reason, you just did not impress her enough
Am
to
I
get on.
0 for 6, 0 for 7? Like, I'm curious. How many times was I pitched and then
I've been
disregarded?
You know what? I think I've been 0 for 7 the last 2 weeks at pitch meetings. I've pitched 7 story ideas the last 2 editorial meetings, which we have every week.
Wow.
And I am 0 for 7. Yeah, I'm like Trevor Story's batting average these days. Not good.
Okay, I'm checked out. But what about a podcast that's not on Poly, which has a very specific agenda, and it's a very good podcast, by the way. Congrats on that, and you and John Michael McGrath, who I did recently book on Humble and Fred to recap the federal election we had. Was it April 28th or whatever the heck that was?
Yes.
So he was great. I think he got the vibe, and he seemed to be a big fan of Humble and Fred, which Humble and Fred really like. So it was a good vibe. Everybody was happy. But why don't you start a podcast where you decide who you talk to?
Funny you should say that, Mike.
Yes.
I mentioned to you that, in my post-agenda life, I'm trying to fly about 20 different planes right now, and we'll see which ones I can land. And I very much hope to create my own show where I can be more of the decider. So we'll see how that goes.
Will that be affiliated with the public broadcaster as
No.
TVO?
No, because I'm
Okay.
doing On Poly with TVO.
Yeah.
So this will be a different thing on my own.
Well, I was going to
if
ask
I can
you,
make it happen.
because you talked about these 14 things you want to do, and the obvious question, if I were an award-winning professional host, I would ask you, what will these 14 things be outside of the TVO things you'll be continuing to do?
Well, put it this way: there are a bunch of different buckets of stuff that I am interested in. I'm interested in podcasting. I'm interested in producing another documentary. I'm interested in the post-secondary world. And I'm interested in writing books. So if you were to say, Steve, is your post-agenda life going to include any or all of those things? The answer I would give you is, I hope so.
So you're not going to give us any more than that right now, because all this is in flux, perhaps? Maybe the ink
Correct.
has to, you have to dot these I's and cross these T's.
I'm trying to make it all happen, and hasn't happened yet. And if and when it does happen, I'd love you to bring me back.
Of
and
course.
We'll talk about that.
Of course. You can move in if you want. By the way, you just used the analogy or whatever, which planes I can land. And I think that's also an excellent teaser for season 2 of The Rehearsal. Which you're going to watch, okay?
there we go.
Which planes can you land?
Okay.
I have a clip I'm dying to play for you, but I did start talking about TMLX 19 about a half an hour ago, and I would like to let the listenership know that everyone is invited. If you can hear my voice, you're invited. I hope John Michael McGrath can make it. It would be amazing. But everybody can come to TMLX 19. It's a free event. It's at 30 Queen Elizabeth Boulevard, which is in South Etobicoke, down the street from the Costco. That is Great Lakes Brewery. That's a harder word for me to say than it is for Steve Paikin to say. But that's where they brew the beer, for goodness sakes. And we're going to have an event from 6 to 9 p.m. on June 26th. And not only is your first beer on the house, we love fresh craft beer from Great Lakes. I have some fresh craft beer for you, Steve Paikin.
Thank you, sir. And I will happily say that I have been to your TMLXs in the past, and they're really a great party. You've always got fabulous people who show up, so I make new friends. I reacquaint with old friends, and of course I get to see you.
And am I right that you did meet Troy Birch at the GLB Brew Pub for a beer in recent history?
Absolutely did. Yep.
Okay.
And in fact, you know what? It's interesting. I told him I wanted to do a show on craft brewing, and we sat down and I sort of did I guess what you'd call a pre-interview with him during our lunch. I took notes, got some ideas for, subject matter that we should do the show on, potential guests. And ironically, I wanted him to come on, and the day that I finally got the green light to do the show, he couldn't come on. So we did the show, but without him. But it was a good show on smaller breweries around Ontario.
Yeah, I mean, Great Lakes is the fiercely independent great brewery. I was there earlier today to enjoy some Sunnyside on the patio. So they'll buy you your first beer at TMLX 19. So Great Lakes will buy you your first beer, and then Palma Pasta, delicious, authentic Italian food. You're married to an Italian. You know good Italian food, Steve Paikin. They're going to feed us. So it's a free ticket, 6 to 9, Great Lakes Brewery. in South Etobicoke. You get a beer, you get some Palma pasta, you get to hang with good FOTMs, you get to see me, and we're going to have a great time. And we'll miss you this time, Steve, but I'm hoping you can make the next one at GLB Brew Pub in either late September or early October.
Beautiful. Only if you invite me.
I would invite you personally.
Okay.
And I do have in my freezer, before you say the hey there, I do have a Palma pasta lasagna for you to take home.
Thank you, Michael. That's
I know you love
very
it.
generous of you. Yes, indeed.
What were you going to say there? Hay is for horses.
I was not going to say that. I was going to say, which municipality in Old Toronto is this your TMLX happening at?
So the one on June 26th?
Yeah.
It's in, what do they call that? Queensway, Stone... It's the neighborhood above Mimico, whatever, because it's just a little bit north of the QEW.
Okay.
In South Etobicoke. What is that called? I think it's called Queensway.
Queensway?
The Queensway, I think they call that neighborhood.
I'm very partial to all the old names before Toronto.
The neighborhood names, like you're in New Toronto right now.
Yeah,
me too. I like the old names too.
I like all that
So I
stuff.
know there's Alderwood, which is a bit north of Long Branch, and then from Long Branch, which is on the water, you got New Toronto, where you are now, and then like a panhandle is Mimico, the big beast that is Brendan Shanahan's Mimico.
Yes, indeed.
That's north of us, and it's east of us. And I think they have a new neighborhood they call Humber Bay Shores that takes you to the Humber River. And then, of course, that's the end of Etobicoke, because on the other side of the Humber River, you're in good old Toronto.
You know, I'm a former City Hall reporter. My first professional job, 1982, was covering Toronto City Hall. I was the bureau chief, if you can imagine, of one person. For CHFI and CFTR, as we then called it. And I used to file stories for both of those radio stations. And, look at this. You've given me a CFTR 680.
Just to hold, not to keep.
Oh,
that's from, that's from Wacko Macco, Evelyn Macco.
Oh, well, I used to work with her, of course. Yeah, back in the day. So I would, remembering my time at City Hall, I was so partial. I loved all those old names, like Swansea and Forest Hill and, Downsview and West Hill and Scarborough and all this kind of stuff. So I like all these neighborhood names. And when Toronto became the mega city, when Mike Harris was premier and became one single tier government, the 416, I was a little worried that a lot of these names might get lost in the shuffle, and I'm glad to see that they have not.
No. People are from Leslieville,
Yeah.
or are they from Riverdale, where I was biking yesterday, and people Bluerdale.
Yeah.
These names are going to live forever. And again,
Good.
if any guest comes over and tells me that they're in Mimico, I get very angry, Steve Paikin. I get red. I start to fume.
Don't get
because
Mike angry.
you're not in Mimico. Okay, once you're in the numbered streets, you've left Mimico, baby.
We're in New Toronto.
You're in New Toronto.
Okay.
Shout out to New Toronto. Okay, that's where the Leafs practice,
Yeah.
in New Toronto.
MasterCard Center?
Well, now, they changed the name to Ford Center of Excellence or something,
okay,
but it's no longer MasterCard. But they, these corporate names, my goodness gracious. Okay, you got the lasagna in the freezer. One last gift here before I play a clip, because we're going to go back and just remember some Paikin on your way out here. But I have a measuring tape from Ridley Funeral Home.
Thank you, Mike. You've given me one of these before, which is in my home in the city. And the new one you give me, I will take up to Manitoulin Island because we need one there too.
Oh my goodness gracious. That's what an honor for Brad Jones, who hosts Life's Undertaking, a fantastic podcast from Ridley Funeral Home. By the way, when you were talking to Troy over that beer about a craft beer podcast, he started one, right?
Not podcast. We talked about an episode of the agenda.
Episode of the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Because he did launch shortly thereafter. We together, because I get to partner with this one, we launched Between Two Fermenters, which is which is a great podcast.
That's cute.
Actually, it's really
cute name.
Yeah. So you ready for a little time machine? This is about a minute as well, and no, it won't be as exciting as my first pitch. But let's listen to 1992.
Ooh.
And a new face here in TV Ontario, but certainly no stranger to television viewers in Ontario and, in fact, to viewers across Canada who know him for his energetic and informative role on CBC and CBC News World. I'm delighted, completely delighted to welcome Steve Paikin to his first appearance on TVO. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
It's been worth waiting for.
We wish you many, many happy decades ahead.
Thanks very much, Elwie. And it has been, it's been a terrific day here at TVO for our first broadcast. We've had a wonderful open house. I don't know if you can see around us here, but there are lots of people in the background who are joining us today for this open house. you got a wonderful spirit here, led by you. You won't remember this, but I interviewed you when I was at Newsworld once. You told me some of the great movies that you'd enjoyed watching that year.
Good grief, how long was that? How long
It was
ago?
a few years ago.
40 years ago, eh? Wow.
It wasn't 40 years ago, but it was long enough ago. It's great to be here. I've always admired the programming that you folks do here at TV Ontario. I'm thrilled that I'm going to be able to join you and do some of it, starting tonight.
Bravo, my friend. Bravo.
Oh boy, I get so verklempt listening to that. That was, that was day one when let's put it this way. When Elwee Yost, who was Mr. TVO back in the day, host of Saturday Night at the Movies for all those years, and Magic Shadows, and when he puts his hand on your arm and he says, "Welcome, young fella, to TVO," it just really was, it was beautiful. And I remember the moment as if it were yesterday, and I'm glad that you could only hear it and not see it, because I had the worst mullet haircut then, which was pretty appalling. But
so did Doug Flutie.
Yes,
he
he
was
did.
a bit earlier,
Yes,
but
he did.
this is 1992. We were
But that
rocking
was-
the Yammer Yager had one.
Yes, he did. Yeah, I guess it was the thing back then. Yeah.
What about Achy Breaky Heart, man? I think
Billy Ray
Billy Ray
Cyrus.
Cyrus was rocking a mullet back then.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful to hear that. That's wonderful to. Elwee was such a lovely guy. The nice thing about him was that what you saw on TV was the way he really was. And of course, his son Graham has become a huge success in California, in Hollywood, making movies, making television shows. Boy, thank you for doing that. That was really nice.
So that was 1992.
Yes.
So, you know what? I'm going to put pin in this because I'm not quite going to
You're
go
gonna
there
put a what
yet.
in it?
Pin in this.
Okay.
People say that in boardrooms all
Oh, I
across
thought you
this.
said pit, and I thought you don't
Pin.
put a pit in it. You put a
No,
pin in it.
Pin. You put a pin in it. My apologies. Okay. Al Grego, who hosts, I mentioned Maneris has an award-winning podcast called Yes, We Are Open. And it's hosted by a gentleman named Al Grego, who you probably met at a TMLX event or two. Al Grego wants me to ask you, and while I'm saying the name Al Grego, let me just tell you that he flew to Regina and collected inspiring stories from small business owners in Regina. And he's been sharing those stories in season 8 of Yes, We Are Open. So I just want you, Steve Paikin, to know that you're going to watch the rehearsal and you're going to listen to season 8 of Yes, We Are Open, an award-winning podcast from Maneris. You got it?
I'm writing it down as we speak.
Write that down. Al Grego wants me to ask you, and I'm going to read it verbatim, but you're not out because you're hosting on Polly and you're still writing articles for you mentioned all the things you're still doing for TVO.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that. But Al Grego says, now that he's out, which side is he on? So Al is referencing the fact that you were deemed highly impartial, like that we don't know whether you're a righty or a lefty or a centrist, or
Good.
are you red, blue, purple? Who knows? He wants you to out yourself. I'm going to hold my breath until you do it.
Well, let me share a little story with you here.
Sure.
I had the honor of being asked to moderate the leaders' debate during the last federal election. And after the debate was over, I went up to shake hands with all 4 leaders who were on the debate stage, as if to, just sort of check in, sort of say, hope you thought I handled things fairly, and I hope you thought it went well. And the first one was Yves-François Blanchet from the Bloc Québécois. All he said to me was, bravo. So he was happy. Next went to Jagmeet Singh, and we actually had a bit of a long conversation, and the former NDP leader said to me, I'm looking up at the clock on the wall right now, and it says I got the least amount of speaking time out of any of the leaders. And I thought, oh boy, here it comes. And he said, but I think I got a chance to make my points. So I think it went fine. So yeah, you did fine. Okay, very good. The next person over was Pierre Poilievre. And I went to talk to him, and he said to me, I just spent 2 hours with you, and I have no idea how you'd vote. And I said, well, thank you. That's kind of what I go for.
Right.
And then I mentioned to him that I said, I have 4 kids. The oldest one is a liberal. The second born is a New Democrat. The third born is a communist. And the fourth born, the baby, is a conservative. And, I think that, and then I think I jokingly said, so I did my job, I never cared what party or what partisan affiliation my kids wanted to have. I just wanted them to be engaged citizens who gave a damn about politics, and it seems like all four of them have done that. So I'm glad about that.
It makes you an ideal moderator for a debate because everyone either thinks they all think you're against them or you're all for them. There is no sense of subjectivity there.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a compliment.
Look, I can tell you this because I know I know myself relatively well after I'm going to be 65 next week. So I know myself relatively well. And I can tell you that a lot of people, I know what question's coming now.
No, because I'm tired of I'm not asking it because every time you're in the basement, I ask you if you dye your hair, and I'm not doing it this time, Paikin.
Okay, but the answer's the same. I am not dyeing my hair. But anyway.
I didn't ask.
Okay.
Don't ask.
Come on, I've got some gray flecks coming in on the side. You can see them now. Anyway, some people define their political interest by affiliating with a particular political party. And I don't. And I never have, and I've never felt a need to. So there you go.
And I think it's wild. You have four. We each have 4 kids, but you have 4 kids, and they're 4 different stripes of the political spectrum.
Yeah, they are.
And I know your wife is conservative.
Yeah, she is.
So, and it sounds like your youngest took that on from. Is it him or her mom? Who is your youngest?
My daughter's the
your
baby.
daughter. Okay, yeah. So she similar to her mother.
I'm sure my wife gets some of the credit for the fact, if I can use that word, some of the credit for the fact that my daughter is a progressive conservative. On the other hand, and I think this is a little bit controversial, and I probably shouldn't say it, but here we go.
Well, you have to say it.
Sorry, Julia, if I get you into trouble with this. I think part of the reason my daughter is a conservative, and she's 22 years old now, she just graduated from Queen's University, is that a lot of her professors were very left-wing. And I think they wanted her to be very left-wing. And as a result, I think she rebelled. And I think there are a lot of other young people. Well, I mean, the results of the last election confirm that. There are a lot of young people in Canada today who are very interested in, conservative partisan politics. And I think my daughter's one of those people who had some exposure to what, she and others would call a too woke agenda. And as a result, she rebelled. And I think that's the biggest reason why she's a conservative. Not to take anything away from my wife's influence, but I think that's the biggest reason why she's a conservative.
That's you know her better than I do. That makes sense to me. A couple of quick notes because another question came in for you, but I did want to ask you really, really quickly. When you were moderating that federal leadership debate that we had before this most recent election, were you at all aware that there was any kind of any friction, anything happening with the CBC and Ezra Levant?
No.
Were you at all aware of what was going on there?
I wasn't because it was in a different building. Oh. I was in a completely different location. I was on the debate stage and stayed on the debate stage afterwards to do a quick postmortem with the producers of the debate. Right. And all of the mishigas that was happening with the press conference afterwards was in a completely different space, and I didn't find out about it until probably an hour and a half later when I went up to the CBC offices in Montreal and turned on the TV and saw, all of the people talking
David
about it.
Cochran, I think, was one of the gentlemen who were very frustrated by all of that. Okay, so that's Rebel News and CBC. You were not privy to any of that. But the question came in from DJ Dream Doctor, and he wants me to ask you what you experienced during, we're going back 15 years here, but during the 2010 police crackdown in Toronto, he remembers you being caught up in all of that.
That was the day when I discovered the power of social media. Because just to remind everybody, the G20 had come to Toronto and there were enormous protests all over the city. There was, I think, a couple of police cars that were torched and there was some buildings that were damaged and vandalized. And I basically, at some point, just left the briefing center, which I think was at Exhibition Place, and just got in a car and started to drive around the city and follow where the protests were going. And I saw, yes, I did see and started to tweet, I think for the first time that night, or certainly, live tweeting what I was seeing.
Right.
A lot of police malfeasance, and it was not good. I saw people being abused. I saw them being brutalized. I saw them being rounded up and put into cruisers and taken away for doing nothing other than sitting on a sidewalk, peacefully protesting. It was completely inappropriate. And of course, I think there were public inquiries called into all this, and there was a lot of further investigation. I started that evening with 2,000 followers on Twitter. And by the time the evening was over, because I think I was the only reporter who actually sort of by following my nose found himself in the middle of some very violent protests. Right. And I started to tweet about it, and I had 11,000 followers by the time the evening ended. And I think the last thing I remember was a police officer coming up to me and saying, "You can either leave right now, this scene on the Esplanade where you're covering events, you can either leave on your own or you can leave in a police car because we're going to arrest you.
Wow.
But you can make the decision yourself." And I'm sitting there, like I'm dressed in a suit and tie. I'm tweeting. I'm clearly not participating in the demonstration. I'm covering it. And I said to him, "I'm just being a reporter here. I'm just covering this event. I'm not participating." And he said, "Well, we have orders to clear the space." And I thought to myself, well, I'm not going to be able to do much reporting in a jail cell. So unlike the other 1,500 people who were arrested that night, I did not go to jail. I decided to leave on my own. I went home and I started to continue tweeting and write a column and book a show for the next day, and there you go.
Wow. That's shocking that we're talking about my home city, Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Yep. It was, you're quite right. It was an appalling evening. I mean, no one should be, this is a long time ago now, it's 15 years ago, but nobody should be arrested for peacefully protesting the fact that the leadership of the 20 biggest economies in the world decide to have a meeting in your city. Peaceful protest is a long-standing, never mind it's a constitutionally protected right, it's a long-standing, perfectly legitimate tradition in the capital city of the province of Ontario. Period, full stop.
Yes, it's a pillar of democracy.
Yeah, and people should not have been kettled for doing it.
What do you think of I can't remember what we're calling this, the bubble legislation for the city? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting because we do have charter rights to protest, but we don't have unlimited charter rights to protest wherever we want, whenever we want, about whatever we want. There are there's a clause in the Constitution that says, these rights are guaranteed as is consistent with a reasonable democratic society. And, it seems to me not unreasonable, regardless of what groups are involved, that you shouldn't necessarily be able to protest, certainly not violently, but maybe even not loudly, for example, outside a house of worship. Let's put it that way. So I don't think there's anything inconsistent. I'm not a lawyer, but I would say that if it's worded correctly, it's not necessarily inconsistent with the charter.
It won't be deemed unconstitutional.
Well, that'll be up to some judge to figure out, but I can't figure that out. But it's not on the face of it necessarily unconstitutional.
So I will tease a upcoming episode of Toronto Mic'd with Ed Keenan from the Toronto Star. We will talk about that. He's got some more to say about some councillors who may have voted in support of the bubble legislation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Knowing that it would not hold up to a constitutional challenge, and there's some discussion to be had there. And again, that's going to be with Ed Keenan when he drops by for his quarterly visit. On the live stream, there's a great FOTM named Tyler Campbell. Tyler's from Hamilton, so I'm going to bring it back to Hamilton, but Tyler chimes in to say, Great Lakes Brewery is in the neighborhood known as Stonegate Queensway.
Oh, there we go.
And I was close. I think I had it.
You had the Queensway in there.
I had to put it all together here. Okay, so speaking of Hamilton, and you love when people refer to the old names, etc., I did have, and I think you played a role in introducing me to Ian Thomas. I want to give you credit for that.
Yes.
But I had Dave Thomas and Ian Thomas on. I know you've had Dave Thomas on recently.
Yeah.
But
we had Ian on years ago.
Of course. Yeah. So this all goes back. So on the show, I think I mentioned that they were from Hamilton. I was corrected immediately by the Thomas brothers.
Dundas.
They're not, yes, they're from Dundas, not Hamilton. So I got an education there.
You're both right, because Dundas, since Hamilton went to the super city, in Toronto we called it the mega city.
Right.
In Hamilton, it's called the super city. Dundas is now technically part of Hamilton.
Have you heard the latest that Dave Thomas leaked on another podcast, that the Martin Scorsese footage of that reunion
has
been handed over to who's got it now? It's a late night talk show host whose name is eluding me.
Jimmy Kimmel?
Yes, his production company.
Okay, well, he hosted the thing.
So I think it's been handed to him
Good.
for his company to carve out a documentary so we can actually see this thing.
Great, because I was at that thing. I was at that taping. It was at the Elgin Theater, I think.
Yeah, the Winter Garden.
Winter Garden, yeah.
Right.
And it was great. It was just great.
Because you, as we know, your late mother was the biggest Martin Short fan.
That is very true. Very true. Yeah, Martin Short. Well, all these guys, like Eugene Levy,
Right.
Dave Thomas, Martin Short, they're all from Hamilton, Dundas, whatever. Yeah, they're all there. So I've known these guys for 60 years.
I believe so. So your mother, who passed away fairly recently,
About a year and a half ago.
about a year and a half ago, she knew Martin Short since he was a teenager, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, not my dad would have. Because my mom was from Toronto.
And that's Larry.
Yeah, my
who
dad-
almost became an FOTM that we never recorded the Father's Day Spectacular.
Didn't quite happen.
Although we could do it this month if you were game.
Didn't quite happen, but yeah, my dad's dad, Sam Paikin, and Martin Short's dad, Charlie Short, were both in the steel business, and they were great buddies, and that's where the relationship begins.
Okay, love all this hammer talk. I'm telling you.
Right on.
I got a text the other day from Tom Wilson, and when Tom Wilson texts, you jump on this thing. And he was recommending somebody for Toronto Mike, who's also a Hamiltonian. Do you know the name Kathleen Robertson?
I know a Kathleen Robertson, but it might not be the same.
Is your
one.
Kathleen Robertson an actress?
No.
Okay, it might be a different. It sounds like
Okay.
a common name. But Kathleen Robertson was on Beverly Hills 90210.
Oh, okay.
This is like her claim to fame. So
Along with Aubrey.
that's no.
Oh no, sorry,
he's
that's
Degrassi.
Not, he's Degrassi, right? She's 90210.
Degrassi's the Canadian one.
Sorry, right. I got all confused there.
Well, now I get pulled into this universe, of course, because I'm on Tori Spelling's shit list. I don't know
Oh
if you
yeah,
know
yeah.
this.
Oh well, I listened to that. I remember it was a great effort to get that thing happening. Yes, I
Wow.
remember.
Okay, and shout out to FOTM Jason Priestley, also a proud fellow Canadian.
Hey, Tom Wilson.
Yeah,
You want to know something about him?
I would like to know everything about him.
Okay. He and I, born in the same town, Hamilton,
Yeah,
same birthday.
but not the same year.
Not the same
'Cause he's
year.
older than you.
He's 1 year older.
1 year older than
Yeah.
you. Okay, you just did less drugs.
Well, yeah.
Nothing
Yeah.
ages
Yes.
somebody more than drugs, and he'd be the first to admit it. He's
He-
clean now. He's clean
yeah.
and sober now.
Yes, I think
Love that
he's-
man, but he had a
I cannot compete in that department.
no drugs. Have you ever done any drugs, Steve Paikin, on your way out of the agenda here?
I think I tried a marijuana cigarette in grade
Jazz cigarette?
like 1978 was the last time I toked anything.
Wow.
Sorry.
No, listen. The
I'm
Good,
high on
the
life,
Good
man.
Brothers had a song called, what's it called? They had a toke song. It'll come to me in a minute here. Okay, so I'm going to shout out one more.
One
Partner.
toke over the line, sweet darling. One
That's a great
toke
song.
Over the line. Is that the one?
I don't think that's the one. I think
Okay.
this one might be. Maybe it's about hash knife, hot knife hash. But that song is a great Tolkien song. I need Canada Kev, but I know in a moment I could go into the live stream and just see what the hell Tyler Campbell's going to tell me about what's the great Tolkien song from the Good Brothers. One of whom is an FOTM. Shout out to Brian Good. Okay, so Nick Iones, you may have met him at GLB Brew Pub at a TMLX event last October.
Oh, yeah.
You may have met him.
Yeah.
He owns Fusion Corporate Development. What he's done, Steve, and I love it because he stepped up to say, how can I help fuel the real talk? How can I support you? And he became a sponsor of the program. So I would like to shine a light on two of his excellent podcasts. One is called Building Toronto Skyline, and his recent guest is Brad Bradford talking about affordable housing. So there's some overlap there.
Saw him last week.
Okay, was he on a bike? He cycles.
I think he just walked. We met near City Hall, so I think he just walked.
He's running for mayor, right? Have you
Yeah.
heard this?
Yeah.
He's made that official, right? That he'll be.
No, he hasn't made it official, but he's
He said he's gonna.
gonna.
He intends to run
Yeah.
run for mayor. I like this guy very much, but I also see that he finished like a distant 8th or something. Like it was really like Olivia Chow had over 260,000 more votes than Brad Bradford in the most recent mayoral election.
well. Okay, let's put a little context around this.
Go ahead.
That was a by-election in which a lot of people ran for mayor. However, one of the things we learned from that mayoral election is that if you're going to have an ideological lane, you can't have a whole lot of other people in that same lane with you.
Right.
And Olivia Chow had basically the NDP lane, if you like, the left-wing lane.
Yeah, I hear what
she
you're
had
saying.
that all to herself.
Right.
And she didn't have to compete with anybody in that lane. Whereas Brad Bradford competed with
Anna Bilow.
Anna Bilow and Josh Matlow and Anthony Fury, and there were a bunch of other people in that lane as well, and they all cannibalized that sort of center-right vote. And
Bilow particularly, because
Yeah.
she finished a strong second.
Yep. So, and look at, you know this, you've covered enough politics over the years. The fact that something happened, 2.5 years ago does not necessarily mean the same thing is going to happen next time. The dynamic is different. We don't even know if John Tory's getting into the race, right? If John Tory gets into the race, that changes things up a lot. So the next race will be fascinating, but who knows who's in it and who knows how it'll end up.
You never know. You never know. I do know that if you have old cables, old electronics, Steve Paikin, you're not going to throw them in the garbage.
Nice segue, Mike.
Because those chemicals end up in our landfill. So you're going to go to recyclemyelectronics.ca. I also forgot to mention the second podcast from Nick Iones, in which he coached me, and I got a lot of feedback from this episode, but it's called Building Success Series. It's a Nick Iones podcast. And again, I was literally his guest, and he basically coached me on how to generate more revenue from TMDS, my digital services.
Yeah.
So he said, sell Paikin on some podcasts and triple your rates. I think that was the notes I took from that.
How do you
one.
spell Ione?
Ainis. It's a Greek name.
Okay.
Iones.
Good.
Iones. I have a clip from somebody that, I mentioned earlier that Ian Thomas, I believe, was connected to me via you because you knew Ian back in the day there. And somebody else was connected to me via you. I'm going to play a little clip of this gentleman.
Premier, I always call you Premier because you were. We always appreciate the fact that when we put out the call to you, you answer, you come on our program, you have many times over these years, and it's great to see you again, and keep on keeping on.
Thank you, Stephen. I just want to say, you and I have had sparring contests. You've chaired debates. I've been on shows when I wasn't comfortable in my own skin, and I was just learning the ropes. So you and I have grown up together in this business, and it's wonderful to be able to join you on this at this moment in time, because you're just one of the great broadcasters. And by the way, your listeners should know we become good friends. So it's great.
You never
Great
have
to
been
be
much
with
of a good judge of character, though, right? There we go. Anyway, Premier, Ambassador, Bob Ray, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
It was lovely.
Bob Ray is an FOTM because you literally ordered him to visit the basement.
One could never order an ambassador to the United Nations to do anything, but I certainly suggested he would enjoy it and it would be worth his time, and he did it, and you had a great conversation. I remember I listened to that one, and look, he really caught me off guard at the end there, because that was, I don't know, was that maybe 2 weeks ago?
It was very recent.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago. And what he said was true. He and I have known each other since 1982, since he became the leader of the Ontario New Democrats. And we have spent more than our fair share of time together, on television, doing various different things, me sticking microphones in his face when he was Premier of Ontario, all that kind of stuff. He ran for the national leadership of the Liberals. And anyway, he's had one of the truly great careers in public service in the history of Canada. And when he said at the end, we've had our sparky moments over the years, but we're good friends now. I really appreciated that. I thought that was lovely, and he and I'll tell you what, he was a law school classmate of a cousin of mine named Lee Paikin, and Lee was lost to suicide many, many years ago, and I remember seeing Bob Ray at that funeral, just inconsolable at the loss of his good friend, and who happened to be my cousin. And, Mr. Ray has seen his share of tragedy over the years. I'm sorry to get so maudlin on you here, but
it's okay.
But, over the 4+ decades that we have known each other, he lost his in-laws in a car accident. He had a brother die from leukemia. My cousin Lee was another great friend who was lost to him. Jim Renwick, I'd put him on the list. Jim Renwick was a former member of the Ontario legislature who died very young, not long after Bob Ray became leader of the Ontario NDP. And I remember Mr. Ray being very emotional at his passing as well. So, over life, you accumulate these moments of tragedy, but you look at him right now at age 77. I think I asked him during the interview, so he's 77. And look how he continues to try to serve his country, which I think is admirable. And, whatever people think about his politics then or now is irrelevant to me. The guy continues to make a contribution, and for that, I think we owe him that respect.
So I enjoyed that clip, not just because Bob Ray's an FOTM, because you ordered him into my basement and he said, yes, sir, but the mutual respect. I'm a big fan of respect, and you could cut it with a knife in that short little clip. You respect Bob Ray. Bob Ray respects you. You become friends despite any differences of any nature, and it's a beautiful thing. And I think I would echo Bob Ray's sentiments. And I would say thank you to you, Steve Paikin, that you gave us the goods with the agenda. It's an excellent show. We're going to miss you. And I wonder in any sense, because I'm going to play a song on our way out, but I'm wondering in any sense, do you feel at all, maybe, especially as June's just starting and it's going to happen all month, like you're attending your own funeral?
Absolutely. And the funny thing is, when we made the announcement that the agenda was going to be wrapped up at the end of June, I started getting... I'm happy to say mostly positive emails from people saying how much they're going to miss it, and they thought I did an okay job, et cetera, and I have said, I think this is probably what it's like to die. People say a lot of nice things about you when you die. I'm glad to say there have been a lot of comments on the other side as well, such as good riddance, you won't be missed, right. You were overpaid, you were a bum in the tank for party X, party Y, party Z. I got a lot of that too. Right. And that's all about that's fine. Everybody's entitled to react to all this stuff any way they want. We're going out with Francis Albert Sinatra. That's a beautiful thing.
And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full. I traveled each and every highway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. Regrets,
I haven't had any.
I've had a few.
That was my next question.
No.
Then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do.
Sing along, Mike. Come on. I saw it through without exemption. I planned each charted course, each careful step along the byway, and more, much more than this. There you go.
Steve did it his way.
Yes, there were times.
Okay, Mike. Fade to black. Let's go.
So no regrets, Steve Paikin.
Absolutely not. I've had the great joy of going to work at the same place for 32 straight years, and I've learned something new every day I've gone to work. What better job could you have?
Will you miss the agenda?
I imagine I will, but I have no regrets about the decision. I think, at the moment, I'm not particularly verklempt about the whole thing. Maybe I will be in the last week. But
you haven't seen that the back end of that final episode when Bette Midler shows up.
I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen.
She's going to sing this song to you.
She sang something for Johnny on his last show.
Was it this song? Something like this.
It was something like this, but it wasn't.
Wind
this one.
Beneath My Wings.
No, she didn't sing that. Her own? No.
Okay.
Oh my God!
Well, you know what?
I forget, and I've seen that show so many times.
You and Frank, I'm going to find that out while you maybe say some final words to the FOTMs who will be tuned in on my birthday, June 27th, for the final episode of The Agenda.
Well, yeah, let's get this straight. The 27th of June will be an important day on the calendar because, of course, Toronto Mike is turning 51 years old and has a complete head of gray hair, whereas Paikin on June the 9th is going to turn 65
Wow.
and barely has any gray at all. And Mike, your jealousy has really been, does
You have
not
a great head of hair, Steve.
is not becoming for a man of your stature. That's all I have to say.
The song Bette Midler sang for Johnny Carson on the final episode
Oh
of
wait,
The
don't tell
Tonight
me,
Show.
don't tell me.
Okay, but
tell me.
cheat over here.
No. Was it the Johnny Mercer song? One for my baby and
Correct.
one more for the road? There it goes.
One
Finally.
more
Yeah.
for my baby. Steve Paikin, good luck to everything. We're going to let your hero, Frank Sinatra, take us home here. You did good, kid.
I took the blows and did it my Yes, it was my way.
Always a pleasure, Steve Paikin.
You know what I've always wanted to do on this show? I've always wanted to say, and that was episode 1703 of Toronto Mike's.
More like this. And that! Come on, you can do it. Go again.
And that
Brings us to the end of our 1,703rd show, 1703. Mark Maron can never catch me now because he announced earlier today he's wrapping it up at this fall. This autumn is the end of WTF podcast with Mark Maron, so he can never catch me now.
You're the king, Mike.
You come at the king, Steve, you best not miss. Go to TorontoMike.com for all your Toronto Mike needs. Much love to all who made this possible. That's Great Lakes Brewery. Steve's got his fresh craft beer here. Palma Pasta. I've got the lasagna in the freezer. Moneris. Listen to season 8 of Yes We Are Open. Toronto Maple Leafs baseball. I know you're going to disappear to Manitoulin Island at some point when the agenda is over, but if I could get you back to Christie Pitts to watch a game with me in the members lounge, it's an amazing experience. You, me, we'd be hanging with the snowman. I'm going to make that happen again. RecycleMyElectronics.ca, Building Toronto Skyline, and Ridley Funeral Home. My next guest is Keegan Matheson. He wrote a book on the Toronto Blue Jays. It's called The Franchise. VP of Sales says, Kathleen went to Hillfield Strathallen. Is that your high school, Steve?
Yeah. Oh, so
So Kathleen Robertson from
It's the same
90210, who's younger than you. She's about my age. So much younger than you. Is this your high school? Hillfield
Yeah.
How do you say that name?
Strathallen in Hamilton.
Strathallen in Hamilton.
Oh, so we weren't there at the same time.
No, you weren't there at the
No.
same time. No, but that's a fun fact.
Yeah.
See you all later this week.